Hi there, Steve here. I'm in Montreal for the Long Fest, Festival des Langues. I arrived last night. Today I want to talk about speaking from day one. And what I really mean is starting to speak early. And I'm talking about that for several reasons. One reason is that whereas I normally wait until I have 5,000, 10,000 words at length before I have my first online discussion, in the case of Russian, I waited a year and a half, I think, before I started speaking Czech. I waited at least 6 months, and I thought I was starting very early. And those are languages where the writing system is not very difficult. With Greek, I started a little bit earlier. And now with Arabic, I've had a few discussions after 5,000 words. And now, after 350 known words at length, I've had two conversations at length with our wonderful tutor, Rana. And so I want to explain that. So one is that I started speaking early, and I'm going to provide some background to that. And two, there was a comment, I think, on YouTube here. Someone said, I have this tandem relationship with someone where I speak English, or at least we exchange Russian for English, and I have the impression we're not making much progress. So I want to talk about speaking and how I see it fitting into the whole language learning process. Bear in mind, by the way, I think Benny, the Irish polyglot, is going to be here. And so I'm looking forward to meeting with him. And in language learning, there really is no bad way to learn. Different people like different things. And the important thing is to do what you like doing. So I talk about my experience. Even last night at dinner with some of the participants, we were disagreeing on the importance of grammar and how much grammar you can learn up front. And some people love grammar and they think it's very logical and that they need that in order to get into the language. And I, of course, prefer to get a lot of the language in me before I try to read any explanations of what the language does. I prefer to experience the language first. So there's many different ways of doing things. Now, speak from day one. Why am I speaking so early in my learning insofar as Farsi is concerned? The biggest reason is that we don't have text-to-speech at length. So because both Arabic and Farsi, with their script, it's sometimes difficult to know how to pronounce the words. So with Arabic, I can click on it and I can hear it in text-to-speech. With Farsi, there is no text-to-speech. So what I do with my tutor, that's point number one. Point number two, I think what has dramatically changed in my language learning is the mini-stories. The mini-stories, I believe, dramatically sped up my learning of Greek, Arabic, and now Farsi. Because the stories contain the most common verbs, they repeat the vocabulary and the structures within each story 3 times at least. And so we get very soon we get a sense of word order, we get a sense of positive, yes, no type sentences, questions, all of this kind of stuff that is typically described in grammar explanations. Through this repetitive nature of the mini stories, you start to get a feel of the language. So I feel that I'm progressing more quickly than was the case when I was learning, say, Russian or Czech. We didn't have the mini stories. So that's point number one. Point number two, having the mini stories now that I have listened to, the first 10 mini stories in Farsi I've listened to 30 times, each one of them, 25 to 35 times. That gives me something to take into my conversation with my tutor. Even though I only have 350 known words, I have listened to a limited number of these stories so many times that I'm in a position to at least use that vocabulary to some extent with mistakes and whatnot. So, I've got this concentrated bit of the language that we can build our conversation around. That makes it a pleasant experience. Obviously, too, if we're on Skype, the connection has to be good. The tutor has to be pleasant. All of these things are important. Where the Skype connection is poor, then it's very difficult to have a lesson. Also, if you go in there to have a discussion and every third word you don't understand, and then I say, how do you say this? And then the tutor explains it, and of course, just by hearing it, especially with a poor connection, makes no impact on me whatsoever. If the tutor sends me a list of these words later on, I can review them, but with taking these sort of mini stories, then I've got a sort of a concentrated dose of the language that I can get into discussion around. The other thing we do, which is very valuable to me, is that I read the Farsi out loud, because it's not like reading Spanish or reading Slovak, where basically it's written the way it's pronounced. For me to get used to the Arabic writing system and to get used to how these words are pronounced and so forth, I find it very useful to read, say, the part one of one of these mini stories. Then we have a discussion around that. Then we go on to another one. We do 2 stories per session so far. Now, so to get from that, so that's why I'm starting early. Would I start early on, let's say if I started learning Turkish, where apparently the writing system is very phonetic, would I do the same? I might. So then why? Why do I consider it useful to speak? Because the speaking improves my ability to focus on what I'm listening to and reading. So in other words, the goal of the conversation is to improve the quality of my listening and reading. Because, and I would take it even further, most of what I do has the goal of making my listening more valuable, because I have more time available to listen than anything else, in my car, doing the dishes, and whatever. So the reading that I do, the reviewing of words and phrases, talking to my tutor, reading again on the iPad or on the computer, it's all with the goal that when I am listening, I'm able to derive the maximum benefit out of it, because listening is the main sort of production end of my language learning. So taking all of this now back to this comment here about how, language exchange wasn't helping a lot. I believe that, speaking is going to help you if you get a lot of it. In other words, if you are immersed in the language and you are every evening or 3-4 hours a day speaking in the language, you are getting so much input that you're going to improve. But if you are speaking 3 times a week on some kind of language exchange, that is not going to improve you very much. If it is an incentive, motivation, it heightens your ability to observe the language, stimulates you, all of those things are good. But then the major learning activity, in my mind, is still the listening and reading. And so this person, for example, who's on a language exchange, that can be very motivating. I want to improve for the next time I speak to Rana in Farsi, so it's motivating. But the place I'm going to improve is through my reading and listening and review after each lesson of the words and phrases. That kind of activity, which I can organize easily. I don't have to set up a time slot for it. I just get in the car and it's on. It's always with me, and so that's where I learn. And the role of speaking is to create, to improve the quality of your input activity. Unless, of course, you are surrounded by the language, in which case you are getting enough input. So speaking early, speaking a little bit later, it depends on your situation, depends on what you like to do. But to me, it's still primarily to improve the effectiveness of your input learning activities. So, and I will go and find Benny and we will disagree over this, and it's perfectly okay to disagree on anything. Nowadays, it's as if we have to persuade everybody of everything. We don't. We can have an opinion. Someone has a different opinion. We can exchange our views. We're stimulated. We agree, we disagree. We maybe move our views slightly. It's all good. Okay. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.